Welcome to the Biohacking Beauty Podcast, your go-to source for the latest in skin health and anti-aging strategies. I'm your host, Amitai Eshel, here to guide you through the science and secrets of maintaining youthful, radiant skin. This podcast is brought to you by Young Goose Skincare, where we aim to simplify the journey to youthful skin by integrating biohacking techniques and longevity molecules into your daily routine. Whether you're new to the world of biohacking or a seasoned pro, we're here to help you achieve healthier and younger looking skin. And today, I'm very excited because my guest is a dear friend and also the founder and CEO of my favorite red light therapy company. Company is called Mito Red, which anyone that's asked me to recommend their red light therapy brand in the last, I'd say, couple of years, have heard me talk about Mito Red and why I prefer to other brands. And I've asked Scott, my guest today, I didn't say my guest is Scott Chaveri, and I asked Scott today to just come and talk a little bit about his experience from the field, how he sees kind of the field growing. Obviously, it has been growing, and at least like as far as people's acquaintance with the familiarity with the technology. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of assumptions that go um, that are kind of being propagated in the field. So you should expect to learn from today's podcast. What are the best modalities that we can use if we want to affect skin health? That's, I think, probably the base of this discussion. But we also are going to talk about, the past, present, and future of red light therapy. And we are going to kind of have the do's and don'ts of red light therapy, how that looks like. So I hope you're going to enjoy this podcast. I know I certainly enjoy speaking with Scott every time that we get a chance. And sit back and enjoy. All right, Scott, welcome to the Biohacking Beauty Podcast, finally.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we kind of sang you guys' praise as a company for a while. And and I think the red light therapy space has gone a long way since I was involved in it, and it's incredible how prevalent it is now, as far as like a modality that people have in their house or
Mhm.
some professional settings as well. So let's start by maybe explaining in your words, like, what is red light therapy? How would you explain what it is?
Sure. So I like to start by explaining kind of the macro, and the macro starts with, the source of all light on Earth, which is the sun. And so the sun is, if you look at the solar spectrum, it's broken up into three main components: ultraviolet light, visible light, and infrared. And actually, so the solar spectrum is about 7% ultraviolet, which UVB helps make vitamin D. It's 39% visible light, that's light that we can see. And it's actually 54% infrared. Good factoid to know. And then so red light therapy we're talking about a very specific narrow slice of that giant solar spectrum, which is basically visible red light and the lower bound of near infrared light. So we talk in terms of wavelengths. So visible light is 400 nanometers through 700 nanometers. And when we talk about red light therapy, we're usually talking about red light starts around 600 nanometers to 700 nanometers. And then you get into near infrared, which is invisible. And typically we're talking about 700 to 900 nanometers. So between 600 and 900 nanometers is typically what we refer to as red light therapy, especially red light therapy that's commercially available.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we talk about infrared, things can get very confusing. Sometimes I ask people to think of near infrared as just red that you cannot see, rather than the infrared that you think of when you talk about infrared saunas or things like that. So it behaves like red, it benefits us like red light, and not necessarily. And I think it helps us also safeguard from companies, obviously no offense to anyone, from companies that try to superimpose the benefits of near infrared light and red light onto their therapeutic, saunas, so
Yes.
onto their infrared saunas, which we see a lot. We see it a lot with influencers where they're going to completely botch the idea behind chemical energy and thermal energy.
Right. Yeah. So I like that. I may steal that from you. And I usually just say thermal and non-thermal. And so generally above 1,000 nanometers, I think is thermal, and below 1,000, I think is non-thermal.
Yeah.
But I like that red light that you can't see. I may borrow that from you.
For sure.
And yes, it is very important to understand that there's very different mechanisms between sauna and what we think of as red light therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly I've seen many sauna companies, from a marketing perspective, try to market their products, excuse me, as full spectrum.
Yeah.
And trying to, like you said, appropriate those near infrared benefits, but you really need a certain power density of light between 700 and 900 nanometers to really have the benefit that we're looking for from red light therapy. And you just don't get that from those quote unquote full spectrum saunas. It's really apples and oranges.
Yeah, I mean, you could, but you're talking about a very complicated device. It's in theory, you could have all the benefits in one, but it would require would require a few things. First of all, it would require a lot of different diodes, and it would require a lot of different capacitor. It's literally, it would be two devices in one, rather than, it wouldn't be one device.
Yes.
Speaking of, I think that's kind of important to kind of maybe first we should start as, so what happens with non-thermal energy? Like, why is red light and near infrared, why are they beneficial?
Sure. So, the term optical window, or there's actually in Wikipedia, you can look it up. It's like the near infrared biological window. There's this window in the spectrum, the light spectrum, where the wavelengths are long enough to penetrate into the tissues, but they're non-thermal, right? And so. Yeah. And again, so my opinion, like the optimal part of the optical window is 600 to 900 nanometers. So what's happening? Yeah. The first thing you need is the actual light to penetrate into the body. So that's step one. And so the wavelengths have to be long enough, and typically above 600 nanometers, so long enough to penetrate into the body. And also, they're not there's this drop in absorption of other chromophores like hemoglobin and melanin. So even in the blue and green range of light, and ultraviolet, all of that light's absorbed by melanin, or it's absorbed by other chromophores in the body. So it's this drop in absorption that happens around 600 nanometers, but you're not having a thermal effect. And so the light goes it's able to penetrate deep into the body and act on the cells. And so what is it doing when it's acting on the cells? So the primary mechanism, or the leading theory, is that it's being absorbed by a chromophore called cytochrome C oxidase inside the mitochondria, and it's unbounding cytochrome C oxidase from nitric oxide so that it can bind with oxygen and make ATP. So that's essentially what they observe. They observe higher nitric oxide, they observe higher ATP, and they know that cytochrome C oxidase is a chromophore absorbing this light. And so the theory is that it's essentially breaking the bond. Cytochrome C oxide is bound with nitric oxide. It's breaking that apart so that there's more cytochrome C oxidase available to bind with oxygen and make ATP. And so all of that makes sense. But I think the bottom line for kind of the person listening is helping your cells make energy. Essentially is what it's doing. And we think we understand the molecular mechanisms with respect to the chromophores involved, and even the even some very specific wavelengths that we understand that there are certain peak action spectra of cytochrome C oxidase, and they happen to be between 600 and 900 nanometers.
Yeah.
So it's not an accident that these lights are using light between 6 and 900.
Yes. And so going back to kind of what you were talking about with CCO, cytochrome C oxidase, which is a very interesting enzyme. It is the last enzyme in the energy creation chain of the mitochondria. It's called the terminal enzyme. And what's really cool about this enzyme is that it kind of is like a lock and key mechanism with oxygen. And then
Right.
the problem is nitric oxide is actually waste material in the mitochondria. We're used to thinking of it as this magical ingredient that you should eat all the beets that you can,
Right.
and you should,
Gives us a pump,
yeah, it gives us a pump.
Performance, in all parts of life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that, you shouldn't use Listerine because it kind of kills the bacteria in your mouth or in your oral cavity, which then creates nitric oxide, etc., that you should breathe through your nose because this bacteria can create nitric oxide, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But that is blood serum levels of nitric oxide. Within our mitochondria, nitric oxide is a net negative product.
Right.
And because of the oxide part of it, because the oxygen part of it, it attaches to CCO, and it actually blocks CCO from functioning, for that matter. So what's really cool with red light and near infrared light, that it actually breaks the bond by friction. So the only thing almost, so 5% of red light near infrared is going to absorb by water, but 95%, which is really cool, is vibrating CCO and releasing that nitric oxide, and the body has a mechanism which it releases it, and now we actually have cellular blood serum levels of nitric oxide rising, and we get the benefits of that, and we get more energy.
Yes, you got it.
And we also have some idea behind oxidative stress being released from the mitochondria, which actually causes a positive result, which lowers inflammation and calls for like regeneration. So it's kind of a magical effect.
Yes, yeah. So first of all, that was a great distillation of it, and secondly, yes, there is the downstream kind of anti-inflammatory effect, right? So there is this transient increase in oxidative stress, but there's this retrograde signaling, I think, back to the nucleus of the cell, and that increases kind of the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant pathways, and so you get this kind of like knock-on secondary effect, which is why we see a lot of benefits in all of these kind of inflammatory conditions, like skin conditions. I'm sure your audience would be very interested to know, like things like acne and eczema and psoriasis. I mean, all these are kind of like inflammatory skin conditions, and you're actually you're in a transient way, you're exciting the cells and increasing energy, but you still see a downstream reduction in inflammation, which is really cool.
Yes. Now, the reason I was asking it, I had a kind of a plan in mind. There is a reason I asked that. It's because I think we've had these conversations before, where in biohacking or alternative health, let's say, is a almost like a not unregulated field.
Mm-hmm.
Like the regulation's like extremely low. And what happens is that a lot of the times, especially if there is a technology that creates a benefit, a few things are happening. One is competition, which is great, fantastic. But a lot of that is like a technology or a name of a technology can be hijacked, and products that are just not efficient or cost like 10 times more than they should, or things like that, start to pop up. Yep. So what are some of the mistakes people can do when they look at red light therapy, when they look at getting a device, in your experience?
Well, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's just like anything else, there's this pros and cons. And I do think that the relative unregulated nature of the industry currently I would say it's a net positive because it has drawn a lot of people into the space and it's grown in popularity and it's become more in the zeitgeist. And I would say that's all mostly positive, rather than having massive barriers like regulatory barriers for even coming in and having folks innovate. But yes, and then you see on both sides, you see things that are way overpriced, and it's just, people, the margins are probably like they're marking things up like 10x or 20x what they cost to build. But you also see stuff that is frankly junk, that they may use a lot of the same language that a legitimate.
By the way, you also see both. You also see products. There is an aesthetic product, like a panel that is mainly marketed to professionals, that is absolute junk, and it's like 5x in price.
Yes. Okay. So you see everything across the board.
Yeah.
And I do think so for the person shopping, I would suggest that they look at a company that has, professional testing done. So at a minimum, that you can request the data and you can see exactly that the wavelengths or what they say they are. And also just, exactly what the power density is. Yeah. And we test all of our devices at 6 inches, the general distance. And so we know exactly the power density and the wavelengths that are coming out of our devices. And that is an important thing to understand, because you're going to, when you really kind of try to dial in dosing, you need to know exactly how what the temperature is that you're cooking the chicken at.
Yeah.
You don't want to cook. You get a nice, beautiful Thanksgiving turkey at 400 degrees at 4 hours, but that's very different from 1 hour at 1600 degrees or 16 degrees at 16 hours at 100 degrees, right? Those are all 1600 degree hours. But if you don't have the right temperature and the right duration, you're not going to get the right effect. And so devices like ours, we know what the power is, we know what the temperature is, and so we can guide you on the degree hours.
I love that example, and also I love the fact that you never used the word "the strongest" when referring to your device. I think that is the first, we've spoken about the outliers as far as price or kind of marketing that is misleading on that end of the spectrum. And what's really cool about let's say we looked for a stretching, the stretch zone, that there is a franchise called the Stretch Zone. There is not going to be a franchise that says we stretch you the hardest, right? It doesn't exist.
That doesn't sound like a good message.
No, and the reason is because there is very, I would say, an innate understanding that stretching should be in a challenging way for the tissue, but not in a way that will create injury. And that is you and I both know how a stretch feels like, right? But in red light, I think most people don't understand that you just need. It's like Michael Jordan never said, if I want to shoot better, I just throw stronger. No, right? There is a delicate aspect of what you need to do in order to score the right amount of whatever power density or something like that. And again, the therapeutic window isn't only wavelength; it's also
power,
dosage.
Yep.
Power. By the way, power that is through space-time, if you would. It's also through how far from the tissue, the centimeters squared, and the time exposed. And that leads me to another type of mistakes that are actually, that's another place where we see exorbitantly expensive products for no reason, and that is the handheld device market.
Yeah.
Where we see, products that, are $2,000 sometimes, saying the strongest, and you move it around on your face. So what you're doing is you're not really getting any type of timed exposure.
Right, right. If you're just moving it and it's just uh yeah, so we don't sell any of those, and I don't have any plans. We don't sell anything that I don't believe in personally,
Yeah.
and that I couldn't see myself using.
Yeah, for sure.
Which it maybe, as a business person is not the best filter in the sense that, for instance, we don't sell masks.
Yeah.
And that part of the reason is this, I just think the panels are far superior for a variety of reasons. And that's just my own personal bias of, I had really bad acne, for, into my 20s, late 20s. And I cannot imagine putting anything on my face. I just don't like putting anything on my face. So I have this aversion to masks. And so even though we know there's a demand for them, but I just think panels are just so far superior and so much more versatile. And that's really our core competency too, is how to build really good panels that'll last forever, frankly.
Yes.
So so we stay with what we know we're good at. But yes, I mean, I'm always open to ideas on product development and how we can better serve our customers too. So
for sure. So as far as products that you guys are doing very well. So I think, when people ask me what you should pay attention to when you talk about like red light therapy companies, the one kind of to choose is, first of all, exactly what you said, which is the track record and warranty, because it's super important that there is a, if I just started my company and I'm telling you, hey, we're going to guarantee our product for a year, 5 years, whatever, you don't know that we would last that long. So it's a little bit of an issue getting a guarantee from that company. So that is super important. But I think there is another thing that you mentioned, and that would lead me to talk a little bit about innovations in the field, because many people don't know that there are innovations in red light therapy. It is the focusing on a single or on a very narrow product range, if you would. And I'll explain what I mean. You mentioned like masks. There are a lot of like temptations out there as far as like coming out with new products, different shapes, different holders or whatever. But the problem is that you will be pushing innovation within diodes significantly slower, and that is because you have if I sold one customer product A and another customer product B and another customer product C, it means that I'm going to go through an inventory way slower, and that doesn't allow you to kind of renew your offering within a panel. And that is why I think you are the first person that ever told me about what we call the quad chip LEDs.
Yeah.
I think you're the first one who told me about it. So what are some of the innovations within red light therapy that you've seen in the last, few years?
So I'm proud to say we have a couple. When we first started back in 2019, I mean, we're all going on almost 6 years now. Mm-hmm. Pretty much everyone used 660 nanometer, 850 nanometer LEDs. And so I came across a paper by Tina Carew. You're very, I don't know if you're familiar with this paper. I mean, you're very knowledgeable in the space, but and he identified the peak action spectra for cytochrome C oxidase. It's a 2008 paper, and it's 620 nanometers, 670, 760, and 830. And so I said, well, if those are the peak action spectra, why wouldn't we try to hit those a little bit better? And so that was one of the innovations, was just simply adding a couple of other wavelengths with peaks. One of the things that the listener should understand is that when we say it's a 660 nanometer LED, it's a band of energy that comes out. It's roughly between 620 and 700 nanometers. Yeah. This peaks very sharply at 660. And so, if you know that the peak action spectra, there's another point and the low 600s, there's some reason to go after that and target it a little bit more specifically. Same thing with 830 nanometers. The 850 nanometer puts out, let's say 810 to 900 or 810 to 890. But you can get LED chips at 810, 830, 850. Yeah. That was one of the things we did in our original Mito Pro. And then the other thing that we did in our Mito Adapt was we put two separate chips under each lens and four wavelengths and 8 circuits. And so that light is very unique. I mean, we have a patent pending on it where you can create 11 different wavelength combinations.
Wow.
So you could try, because at the end of the day, we know we want to stay pretty much between 6 and 900, but we really still trying to understand which wavelengths are best for which use case, or which wavelengths are best for the individual. And so with that light, you can make half of it 630, half 810, 850, half 660, half 810, 850, half 810, half 630, 660, half 850, on and on and on. So there's all these different combinations, and that doesn't exist. Because, you're very different than I am, and you may find that 810 nanometers and 660 work best for you for whatever it is you're using it for. For me, it might be 630 and 850. Or maybe it's different for a use case. Maybe for an injury, you'd want to use a certain combination, but for sleep, you'd want to use something else. For skin, you'd want to use something else. We get those panels also. You can make the entire face red, or make the entire face near infrared only. So that was an innovation. And then kind of the logic behind that was because somebody had approached me a couple of years ago and said, why don't we come out with a device that has a sleep mode and a recovery mode and a skin mode? And I said, well, yeah, we could, but I would just be guessing at the wavelength, right? And so I said it would be better to just let loose something like this into the wild and systematically gather data from users, and then we maybe can say, hey, based on our user feedback from thousands of data points, this is what our users are telling me is working best for sleep, or working best for exercise recovery. And then A, we're not making claims, and B, it's not just my opinion of reading the science. It's like a crowdsourced, systematically data collected way of guiding people. So that light has been on the market 18 months, and it's been on my to-do list to look at the data. I still haven't done it, but we are collecting data from users through the app, and we're hoping that ultimately that we can guide and be more prescriptive, and then also maybe even do studies based on the data to kind of confirm what we're doing.
That's really cool. Talking about adjusting lights and things like that, we see, obviously driven by the ability of manufacturers to provide it, but we see a lot of companies. I think Juve started it, which is like a pulsation of the light. Did you look into it? The fact that there's no real data that supports it is fine. But have you looked at all? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts about it?
Sure. So there's two elements. Well, actually, it's a three-pronged story, so I can give you the three prongs. The first prong is that there is something to pulsing when it comes to brain entrainment.
Exactly. Yes. I've spoken actually to Lou Lim from V-Light.
Yeah.
I told him that I don't think that there's any data, and he started showing me data. So yeah, I
but that's a very specific use case, though. That's the brain, and the brain has delta and theta and different brain waves, and when you expose it to light, pulse light or electromagnetic fields, the brain can start to entrain to that. So that's very specific to the brain. I mean, but when you talk about putting it into a panel of like an LED light therapy panel, as if it's going to have some impact on the muscle, that's where I get very skeptical.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, again, because the industry is very well unregulated, what I did see is a lot of manufacturers start to market pulsing as a way of differentiating the product, and linking to all of these studies. And there are a lot of studies that are done with pulsed light, but they're done with lasers. Yeah. And the reason, I can't say categorically, but usually if you read the study, the reason that they're pulsing the laser is because they're trying to use a very, very high-powered laser to get really deep penetration into the tissue, and they don't want to heat up the skin. So the countermeasure is turning it on and off, right? So, but then to transmute that and say that's apples and oranges. The lasers are not LEDs, and the LEDs are not that super high-powered. They're very safe. And to say that, hey, there was this big benefit from this pulsing study. Look, pulsing's great. It probably had nothing to do with the pulsing of the light. It had a lot to do with the high-powered laser, that was being. Now, so I was super skeptical for those two reasons, and we never did anything. But I think there are one or two studies that I was able to find on LEDs at 10 hertz, where the scientists claim that there was more of a benefit than non-pulse light. So I could send you those studies, but they're not a lot, frankly. And so, is there a huge body of evidence showing that pulsed LEDs are somehow more beneficial? No, but it's an easy thing to add into our devices. So we're actually going down the path of adding a 10 hertz pulsed near infrared only. And again, I believe in giving our customers options. So the option will be there if you want to try it. But, we're very transparent, and, there's a couple of studies that have shown benefit from 10 hertz pulsing. So it isn't a huge body of evidence. Personally, I don't use the pulsing function at all.
Yeah.
And never have.
Do you think it would be a good idea to do it for a laser cap?
I don't know. I mean, for hair, we have laser. Well, so that the reasoning would be to use a more high powered laser. Mm-hmm. That actually is somewhat regulated, and we have 510K clearance for that. So we would probably need to go through significant regulatory hoops in order to do a more powerful laser, because lasers can be problematic into the eyes, and so that would be the barrier there. I think that there's actually something to be said for that, though, right? Like if we could use a more powerful laser, get more deep into the follicle, that potentially there would be more benefit for hair growth. Having said that, the products that are on the market now, not just ours, but there are others that they're pretty good. They're pretty good, and the track record's pretty good there for hair growth. I mean, I've known about that for over 10 years. That was actually one of my initial introductions into LLLT.
Low level laser therapy.
In hair helmets, I knew a guy was building them in his garage because he was trying to solve the hair loss problem, and he was building pretty cool helmets in his garage. It was pretty impressive. This is like 12 years ago, and that's how I first learned about it, frankly.
Got it. Okay, let's talk about something that we've been hearing, obviously, with Gary Brecka and being on Joe Rogan and basically saying how he gets into the red light therapy bed every day, and again, I believe a lot of different new players coming into this market in the last few years. Let's talk about like the decision making, the decision tree of like what size panel to get. Should I irradiate my whole body? Should I only focus on a specific area? Should I get a bed? How often should I get into it? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I would start by saying that in the office, we have a bed, and I use that during the day. And then at home, I have two giant 4-panel setups sandwich, and I stand in between those, sometimes on a vibration plate, and I irradiate my whole body. So that's how I personally, although I'm super spoiled, right? I mean, I own a red light therapy company. So I'm able to do that. I have the bed here, and the bed is also available to employees, and I encourage them to get in there and break up their day and do it. It's a nice way to break up the day. I'm a fan of irradiating as much of the surface area of the body as you can. If you have an injury, you have an acute issue, you hurt your elbow playing tennis, and certainly there's a case for just doing some extra on your elbow. But in terms of just day in and day out, I am a fan of illuminating the entire body. I mean, our ancestors were outside pretty much half naked in the sun all day long. And to me, that's how we're designed to receive these beneficial wavelengths of light, not necessarily spot treatment. Having said that, I do think that, so my suggestion would be to get as large a panel as you can, given how much space you have and what your budget allows. And then, and then try to expand over time. But I do think even just getting a small panel and using it on your face and then on certain parts of your body, like there is a benefit. I mean, there's a benefit even just from, sometimes folks will ask me, and it's kind of an obvious question, but it's not so obvious. Like if I shine it on my leg, will it benefit my arm? Now, the answer is no and yes at the same time. And so it's no in the sense that obviously if you want to benefit your arm, I would suggest shining it on your arm. But there's also just from a resource allocation standpoint, if you have an issue with your leg and you're helping it heal faster, then your body has resources to allocate to other parts of the body. So in a way, you actually are helping your entire body by even only shining it on a part, just from sparing resources, right? So, but I usually say, hey, just shine it on your arm, obviously. But so again, so tie a bow on it, I would say get the biggest panel you can that your space and budget allows. And, I do think there is something to be said for illuminating as much of the body as you can.
100%. What about, what are some of the, first of all, any, I don't know if you run those ads, but a lot of times we see like ads of someone doing yoga, fully clothed, and a red light panel somewhere there in the room. So obviously that doesn't work as well, right? You gotta have, no barrier between the panel and the skin, and you should be pretty close to the panel.
You should. So red light won't go through clothing. I mean, the infrared will. I mean, the infrared goes into bone. So so you'll get some benefit, but the ideal state, being far away, obviously the power density drops off as you move far away. We usually recommend about 12 inches from most of our panels because our panels are pretty strong. And yes, just invest the 10 minutes or so to be stationary about 12 minutes parallel from the face of your panel. And that is really the way to do it. I mean, that's also why I'm not a fan of putting it in the sauna personally. Yeah. We did prototype a couple sauna lights and I wasn't happy with them because there's no free lunch. When you have to solve for the heat problem, the power density drops off. So the lights weren't as bright. And then also I don't know how you can possibly be equidistant or parallel to a panel when you're sitting in a sauna. You really need to be standing. And also it's just, so I just wasn't happy with it. And I'm a bit of a red light purist. So we kind of shelved the whole sauna light thing. You really just need to invest the 10 minutes, but it's so well worth it. And you can stack other things. We're coming up, we're writing like a MitoRed routine or MitoRed ritual document. And in it, it's like prepare your space and get ready, because it really needs to be part of your daily self-care ritual, your daily self-care routine. And here are some suggestions on things you can stack. I mean, box breathing or meditation or gratitude practice. I mean, take the 10 minutes. You can surf emails if you want, but we would suggest, that actually this is your opportunity to disconnect and have that 10 minutes, reset your nervous system, absorb that energy, visualize things in your life. So we're kind of writing this document, trying to have fun with it, and might put some corny jokes in there because I make corny jokes. But really, if that 10 minutes is well worth it, not just from the benefits you get from the light, but all these other knock-on benefits that you can get from just disconnecting for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would completely agree. And also, there is something. You are getting some energy to the brain, like you are, and if you are doing some, you're greasing some grooves as far as like concentration, neuroplasticity. A lot of the things that you are doing when you're doing meditation, for example, it is logical that they would go hand in hand. That you're going to get increased benefits from having some more energy in your brain while you're doing that practice. So even if you were kind of flipping the script and you're saying, how can I get more out of my mindfulness practice?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it goes both ways.
Yeah. So, having said that, like, what are some of the most underrated benefits you feel like that there are from exposing yourself to red near infrared?
Well, so it's an interesting question. I would say the reason, so the most rated benefit, I would say, is skin. In the sense that our largest sellers are the tabletop panels, presumably folks using it on their face for skin benefits. So I would say that's the most rated. So probably the most underrated would be, underrated at time of purchase, but rated after purchase is sleep. So that is, I think a lot of folks don't expect that. And then they're pleasantly surprised when they notice that they're sleeping better when they're using their device. And so we often hear that feedback. And I know personally that's a big thing for me, because I'm one of those people, if I don't sleep well, I'm a total waste of a human. if I get a bad night's sleep. I'm worthless the next day. I need a good night's sleep just to be barely minimally functional. And so getting good sleep is so important for me. I have this crazy sleep hygiene routine and everything, but also using my red light during the day is a big part of it. And also getting early sun and getting out in the sun as much as I can is part of it. But so I would say sleep, and then the sleep's probably the biggest one that I could say.
Well, it's a good point. I would say, within skin health, I think there are some underrated things. I'll give you a few. One is there is a University of Yonsei in Seoul in Korea. Actually, I might be conflating two studies, like one from University of Yonsei, the other one University of Seoul. But there is a study looking at reduction in hyperpigmentation by preempting sun exposure with red light therapy. So by using red light therapy before sun exposure.
I love it.
And here's the sense I'm making out of it. And by the way, I spoke about it quite extensively in the Luke Story podcast, because there is a lot of debate around sun exposure nowadays. And a lot of debate around something called a non-existent, a Bigfoot of the biohacking space that is called solar callus, which does it's called, for that is called melanin.
The Bigfoot of the biohacking space.
The Bigfoot of the biohacking space, because
solar callus is the Bigfoot. Okay.
because they are alluding to a like another phenomenon. If you think about it, you could increase your resistance to sun damage, which is called melanin.
Yep.
The problem is you're diminishing the benefits as well. So,
you mean the vitamin D synthesis?
The vitamin D synthesis. We know that in the African American community, there is a higher prevalence of vitamin D
deficiency. Yeah.
Deficiency. So melanin isn't isn't the panacea of like getting the benefits of sun exposure without any of the harm. So when people that really are biased a little bit and say, hey, just get as much sun as you can, you're not going to get skin cancer, you're going to get all the benefits because you're kind of developing some kind of resistance over time, that's where they're getting their, I think it's a zero-sum game, if you would.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've seen these kind of extremes develop where you've got the quantum folks. I guess I would call them quantum folks, which are like, just go outside all day long, doesn't matter, never wear sunglasses, never wear any sunscreen, and that's and I think that's an extreme, and that's as bad as an extreme as the folks are saying hide inside all day and slather every sort of sunscreen on your skin, like every square inch. So I think that there's a middle ground, but I do think that there is something to be said for being outside as much as you can, particularly when, the old adage used to be, when your shadow is longer than you.
Yeah.
Be outside and get all the benefits of that near infrared radiation.
Exactly. And now I'm getting to what makes sense to me as far as safe sun exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes sense to me from an evolutionary standpoint is we normally were out when the sun just came out, and that was our skin's greeting to that day, right? And what we know is that you get more energy in your tissue because of that red and near infrared light. And by the way, also far infrared increases your resistance to free radicals, things like that. But red and near infrared help you deal with higher UVA, UVB levels later on in the day. So if you are, coding from like probably from midnight until like 6 a.m., going to sleep until like noon, and then you're going out.
No, it's bad. That's a bad recipe. That's a bad recipe because you haven't prepared it. You're just going out and you're getting rained on with high UV. No, the recipe is to go out at sunrise and try to spend as much time as you can out when there is new UV. And that, you're right, that is absolutely going to prep the skin. I mean, that's pretty much what I try to do, and also use obviously supplement with red and near infrared light devices and then I'm outside 10, 15 minutes midday for that vitamin D. And then I come in. If I'm going to be out longer, I will absolutely put on a hat, and I will put on sunglasses too, actually, because I want my eyes to work when I'm 100.
Yes.
And I know I understand there's a trade-off with the circadian signaling, but I'm more concerned about cumulative UV damage to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a realist when it comes to this, and I think that so I'm pretty much aligned with you. But I also agree. You've seen the studies where they expose a couple preprint studies where they expose the skin to different wavelengths of light, and then they irradiate it with UV, and then as you get to the red and the infrared, you get a protective effect. Like in one of the studies, the researchers referred to it as SPF 15.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool.
It is,
but
as opposed to oh, go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, but that you get that by preconditioning the skin with near infrared. You don't get that if you just go out at noon, and you're gonna burn.
Yeah, as opposed to, by the way, things that I'm hearing like there are a few like supplements in air quotes that you can take that increase your carotenoids, or like astaxanthin, or things that increase your resistance to UV damage. These are less than an SPF 1.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So the red light
in the ocean.
Exactly. That's, to me, red light's probably the best kind of hack as far as like preparing I think that's an underrated benefit as far as like red light. Another thing that I think it's remains to be seen how true what I'm going to say is, but one of the more esoteric kind of theories around red light and near infrared is the structuring of water in the mitochondria. So there is a structuring effect of water in the mitochondria, which that's a little bit of biology lesson, but which allows you to create, which allows the mechanical part in the mitochondria that creates ATP, that creates energy, to spin in a more efficient manner, creating more energy more efficiently. And that's as far as like what it does in the mitochondria. But in general, we have particles around areas like fascia, for example. Elastin fibers are probably the most impacted. As we grow older, there is a flipping of polarity that happens in the coating of those fibers that make them from being able to glide, how they interact with water, so being able to glide on top of each other, to being sticky. And there are studies, obviously, again, we're talking about esoteric studies, but they're really cool, that shows that we can reverse the polarity of those coatings and have a gliding effect again between, elastin fibers or fascia, which I think is like super cool.
That's pretty amazing. Do you recall the wavelengths? Because the structuring of water piece, I have to admit, I don't know that much about. I'm familiar with Gerald Pollack's book, I think, The Four Spades of Water, I think, where he talks a lot about that. But my understanding, and perhaps you would know better than me, is that occurs above 900 nanometers.
I'll tell you right now, but I will tell you very, very quickly.
Or maybe that's our best understanding. And so there's generally, in my mind, been a kind of a bifurcation between the red and the infrared light that we find in like lights like ours, and the structuring of water, which I thought happened a little bit higher up. And I know that in saunas you might be exposed to that, but maybe it's not as high up as I'm thinking.
Well, first of all, as you said, a lot of the red light therapy, although it has a peak of a peak of expression at a certain wavelength, a lot of the time you're talking about a bell curve of
I'm just curious, and maybe we can take it offline. Like, if you have some of these studies, I'd be curious to see what wavelengths they use.
Yeah, I was trying to pull it like super fast. but I I can't. But I will send you this. It's pretty cool. It is a study. The study that I'm referring to, they also exposed them to high UV radiation beforehand. They like sent it's from Germany, and they like sent the subject study. They did in vivo study, and they sent the subject study to like Cairo for a month to deal with like high levels of pollution and UV. Yeah, I think here it is. Here it is. Now the question is finding. So it's called, by the way, it's called facial rejuvenation in the triangle of ROS, reactive oxygen species. Now I need to find the NM, the nanometers here. 670.
Oh, nice. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. So it's red light.
Yeah. So great study. People should go ahead and read it. There's also a nice before and after within that study. So, and that's something I think, actually, that's a point that we're kind of running out of time because we're trying to keep it within an hour. But
Okay.
within this geek.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that dovetails right into like how you're, I mean, we didn't talk about even the green tea phytoserum and the red light combination, right? Like, you know, in terms of combining the two, because I mean, I've used your serum, it's awesome. And that one study that was, well, I'm sure there have been more, but in terms of like stacking some of the skincare products that you have with red light, like, I mean, you've probably talked about this before, but I know just putting, my understanding is the green tea antioxidants in the skin actually buffer some of the ROS and hopefully improve the net benefits.
Yeah, and also we're working on something. It's going to probably come out in like probably 6 months. We're working on a product that would actually literally increase the energy created from red light. It's pretty cool.
Oh, man. All right. Well, we got to talk about this because obviously, you know, our customers are using red light and they're interested in ways that they can improve the benefits of red light. And that's constantly what I think about is how can I improve my customer experience? Part of it is by, you know, improving the results that they get. Right. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I do want to focus on like just, I think it's really important to know that, in my opinion, most people actually don't get the benefits that they could with red light therapy. And I'll explain what I mean. Red light therapy, although it's one of those really unique approaches that allow you to get a myriad of results from one product, if you would.
And
so I'll explain what I mean. Again, I referred to beet juice in the beginning. Save your money on a consumable nitric oxide approach, and you have a product that literally harnesses the nitric oxide that is made within the mitochondria, and you can get probably max amounts of nitric oxide circulating from using red light therapy, especially continuously. And actually, a lot of the reason that you wouldn't want to use red light therapy like forever, just be in front of it for like 7 hours, among other things, is the amount of nitric oxide released. So I think it's like super cool as far as that approach. It also, as we said, like reduction of inflammation, things like that, skin health. But I think most people don't understand that this is a stackable modality. So if, especially when talking about the skin, like if you've done any type of stimulatory effect product like microneedling or, you know, or like peel or like retinol or like a lot of things that are now saying to the skin, hey, go ahead and repair.
Right.
Go ahead, turn over cells, things like that. That is where, no pun intended, that's where red light therapy shines. When you have instructions made or signaled to the body, and now you're increasing the body's capacity to do them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I totally agree. I mean, one of the the origins and the discoveries was, you know, improved wound healing, which you know exactly what you're saying, right? Like so the body's already sending signals. Hey, you know, we got an issue here. We got to marshal some resources, and all you're really doing is you're just providing some additional resources to the body to fix whatever it's trying to deal with. So totally agree with you. I mean, the wound healing, I mean, essentially microneedling and everything you said, they're just an exercise recovery. These are all minor wounds that the body's gonna repair and be better for it on the other side. So you might as well support it in that process.
Yeah, I am. So yes, definitely. I want to say that we have an affiliate code for people who want to buy the
You know,
product.
it's Young Goose,
Amazing. You
all
see,
one
you know
word.
better than I do. Young Goose, it'll give people 5% off, right?
Yes, and we'll
Right.
we'll throw in a free gifts because you and I we're friends.
Yeah, amazing. And it's very important for people to know that we don't really deal with codes normally. Like normally, unfortunately, we have guests here that have products, and normally we don't have codes because maybe it just doesn't occur to us that people would need a little shove to get a product.
Yeah.
But I think this is a very important like cornerstone of health. I think light and temperature are the two cornerstones of health.
Right.
So we could not recommend. I have your panel. I love your panel, and I couldn't recommend a company more. That's quite frankly. So it's anyone who was on the fence. I highly recommend getting a panel.
That means a lot coming from you because I know. Well, first of all, how smart and knowledgeable you are. So that means a lot.
Thank you. I fooled you to think that. That's great. No, fantastic. Listen, Scott. I really, really hope that we can join forces in the future and create something that would benefit everyone. I am all really inspired by the way that your company is conducting business, and I think it's one of the better examples in our biohacking field, and could not recommend people doing business with you enough. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you, everyone.